Today I'll be talking about one of the most badass characters in comic book history. Rorschach has a different aura altogether with his trench coat, the shifting mask, and his journal narration that sounds like it was written by a man who has not slept in a decade. Maybe it was. I have been obsessed with this character for years, and I'm sure you are as curious about him as I am. Not just about what he represents or whether he is the hero or the villain, but what is Walter Kovacs biologically? Like, what kind of a body or a nervous system produces a man who gets tortured in prison and barely flinches? I really wonder how he became so capable of everything we see him do and what broke him enough to become like that. So let's find out our answers and more under 10 psychological facts about Rorschach. Who is Rorschach? His name is Walter Joseph Kovacs, and he was born on 21st March 1940. His mother, Sylvia Kovacs, who was a prostitute, physically abused him regularly, and his father, well, was absent, and the only thing known about him, other than his name, Charlie, is that he liked President Truman. Walter grew up having no support in one of New York's worst neighborhoods. Naturally, he had no reason to trust another human being. He becomes a costume vigilante, but with no powers or a team. He names himself Rorschach after the inkblot psychological test created by Airman Rorschach, and I just know that psych students appreciated him the most and overanalyzed the hell out of him. And he has just one rule, which is that the guilty get punished, and he has no exceptions. He is played by Jackie Earle Haley in the 2009 film, and I must say, he was really physically committed to his performance, especially the low-register, rough voice that he gives to Rorschach, which barely sounds human. In the original 12 issues by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Rorschach's journal gives the story one of its most memorable narrative voices and the moral spine of a story that keeps asking the same question over and over. Does his black and white perspective make him the most honest man in the room or the most broken? After going through every panel of this story, almost certainly the answer is both, and the reason lives in his biology. What did his childhood actually do to his body? If you think Rorschach's psychology is some personality quirk, then stop right there, because it definitely has a biological significance, and I'll explain why. I've already said that his mother used to physically abuse him, and he experienced this right from when he was born. Even the men his mother used to bring home were threatening. He could feel the resentment towards him quite openly, which resulted in no stable emotional anchor at any point in his early life. In Chapter 6, The Abyss Gazes also, which I would tell anyone to read before anything else. The social worker's notes, coupled with Dr. Malcolm Long's evaluation, reveal how disturbing Rorschach's early life was. Psychologically, he is broken for sure, but even neuroscience tells us that children who experience prolonged physical abuse can develop a different stress response pattern. Their body's main stress response system can be dysregulated, meaning their cortisol and threat responses may become abnormal rather than simply switching on and off like a healthy stress response. Even their prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for empathy, impulse control, and decision making, can develop differently under chronic stress, and this can weaken connections to the emotional centers it is supposed to regulate. As a result, the brain can start seeing the world in two extremes, like good or evil, because it understands that making quick decisions is absolutely needed for survival. So for young Walter, thinking in black and white may have become a way to stay safe. There's a word for this in psychology known as splitting, and it's when one struggles to hold contradictory views at the same time. That is why Rorschach sees people as either completely guilty or completely innocent, with no middle ground. His mask symbolizes that as well, as the black and white patterns never mix into gray. From a trauma-informed angle, his childhood gives us a believable biological framework for why he might process threat, morality, and trust in such extreme terms. He has adapted to survive hostile environments by treating every threat as something to be eliminated. How small is he, and why does that matter? I feel this detail about him is kind of underappreciated. Rorschach, or Walter Kovacs, is 5 foot 6 inches and approximately 140 pounds, which means he is significantly smaller than Night Owl 2, the comedian, and Ozymandias. He is smaller than most of the people he fights, and yet criminals in New York are scared of him. Now, how is that possible? It's his ability to tolerate pain and his near-total disregard for his own safety. He He will absorb the most serious beatdowns without slowing, and this is really unsettling to face because most fight logic assumes that your opponent does not want to get hurt, and Rorschach breaks that norm. His size may be small, but that gives him the advantage of being faster than his bigger opponents. He can attack from angles a larger fighter cannot easily cover. Being a 140-pound man who regularly fights people twice his size, he has specifically designed his combat style around it. He does not try to match anyone in raw strength, but is willing to do more damage than the other person is willing to take. Watch any fight scene in the 2009 film and pay attention to how physically small Rorschach looks against his opponents, and then watch how that size difference does not matter the moment he starts inflicting pain. Zack Snyder framed this on purpose, and the early fight scene in the alley gives you a good idea of what to expect. What is his pain threshold, and is it actually human? Let me remind you of some moments where his capacity to tolerate pain does not seem human-like. Rorschach breaks a criminal's fingers to extract information, and there was not even a tiny hint of emotion on his face. Then he describes his past injuries to Dr. Long with the same emotional tone you would use to describe a grocery list. He is also subjected to a brutal punishment, but he still does not give up, especially in the prison sequences. I won't say his pain tolerance is not human. It's more on the extreme end of the human range. Pain tolerance varies a lot as it's influenced by your genetics and hormones. Some people are just wired to process pain less intensely. This explains why soldiers in combat sometimes don't realize they have been shot until the fight is over, because adrenaline temporarily mutes pain almost completely. Plus, if your body has been in pain long enough, it stops treating pain as an emergency and it becomes a default state. Walter Kovacs was in pain for years because he was old enough to defend himself. Pain had become usual for him, so this is not some kind of a superpower. His body was trained, against its will, to normalize an abnormal experience. And now that the same body is taking hits in alleyways and prison corridors, the criminals on the other side are just not prepared enough to deal with someone who does not respond to pain the way a person normally does. What exactly is the mask, and what does wearing it do to him? In Chapter 6, The Abyss Gazes also, Kovacs explains his strange mask to Dr. Long, saying that the fabric is made from a material derived from Dr. Manhattan's technology. The ink blot patterns are produced by two thick liquids, one black and one white, that are placed between layers of latex. They constantly shift and change as they react to heat and movement. However, the black and white never mix and become gray. They always stay separate. I hope you noticed, though it's easy to miss, that the black and white patterns always stay perfectly symmetrical, just like the real Rorschach ink blot test. The symmetry helps people project their own meanings onto the image, and that's exactly what the mask does in Watchmen. Great visual storytelling. Kovacs got the fabric while working at a garment factory, but initially it had been ordered as a miniskirt for a woman, Kitty Genovese, who called it ugly and refused to pick it up. The whole story was based around her case, and this was a reference to the real murder victim in 1964. In the version of the story that shocks Kovacs, Genovese was raped and murdered while her neighbors supposedly watched from their windows and did nothing. Upon learning that version of the story, Kovacs took the fabric and made a face he said he could bear to look at in the mirror. He never saw the mask as a disguise, which he tells Long directly in Chapter 6. He considered the mask to be his primary self, while Walter Kovacs was a performance he put on, which shows his identity shift. In the 2009 Watchmen, when Rorschach's mask comes off, Jackie Earle Haley's body language goes from stiff and controlled to more relaxed and human. The mask changes how we see him, and when it is removed, we perceive the character in a different way, just like an ink blot test where we project our own meanings. Haley drops the voice too as the mask comes off, and suddenly Walter sounds human again. The contrast hits hard because the voice was part of the mask the whole time. The 7th Cavalry in the Watchmen series on HBO literally made Rorschach's mask their uniform. The mask has become the symbol of a white supremacist terror group, which Rorschach used to wear as his true face. The man has been dead for more than 3 decades, but has left behind a lasting legacy of causing damage in the world. The famous story that 38 people watched her die and did nothing was largely inaccurate. Decades later, journalists and researchers would seriously challenge that version of events, which means that Rorschach's shattered faith in humanity was built on a distorted story. His black and white worldview was built on a gray lie, and this is the most Watchmen thing about Watchmen. What did the Blair Roche case do to his body and mind? I have read Chapter 6 more times than I can count, so I'll walk you through this part properly. Man, this section hits the same way every time. The year is 1975 and Rorschach is investigating the kidnapping of a 6-year-old girl, Blair Roche. He tracks the kidnapper, Gerald Grease, to his home, and in a shocking turn of events, he finds evidence of the little child being butchered and fed to Grice's German Shepherd dogs. Rorschach kills one of the dogs with a meat cleaver and waits for Grice. When Grice comes home, Rorschach chains him to a pipe and leaves a hacksaw beside him, giving Grice an impossible choice as he pours kerosene around the building and lights it. Nobody came out. This was his breaking point. Not his childhood, not Kitty Genovese. This. He tells Dr. Long, stood in firelight, sweltering, felt cleansed, felt dark planet turn under my feet and knew what cats know that makes them scream like babies in night. Looked at sky through smoke heavy with human fat and God was not there. And later, when talking about that night, he says, whatever was left of Walter Kovacs died with that girl. Even if this is a metaphor, it reads like an identity fracture so severe that Walter Kovacs stops thinking of himself as Walter at all. That event ruined any belief he still had in a moral world, and to cope with it, he rebuilt his entire identity around only one harsh idea. He would pardon nobody with any mercy ever. It's miserable how his grief drove him to become like this, and he stopped believing that the world could be otherwise. How does he survive conditions that would break most people? I was puzzled about this for a while, so let me share what I worked out. He climbs buildings in the freezing New York weather with barely any protection from the cold, and even survives a building explosion from very close by. Then he is enduring Antarctic conditions wearing basically a trench coat over what looks like normal street clothes. He eats cold beans from a can, barely sleeps, and does all of this continuously across the entire 12 issues without any rest day. Now, for you and me, I am assuming that any one of these conditions will be draining for our body. But for him, who is already severely traumatized, his nervous system can be read as stuck in a constant state of stress. His body can be interpreted as living in a chronic threat response mode, whereas most people only enter that state during emergencies and then calm down afterward. But Rorschach never really calms down. He is always in survival mode, and this can let someone push through harsh conditions longer than most people could do. He has just never stopped long enough to think how badly this is damaging him over time. What does his fighting style tell us about his body? His fighting style tells you so much about how his mind works under pressure. See, he almost never fights fair. In the comics, he uses hairspray and a lighter as a makeshift flamethrower, handcuffs as knuckle weapons, and even throws boiling cooking fat in an attacker's face in one of the prison sequences. His grappling gun, made by Night Owl 2, can also be used like a harpoon when needed, and he uses whatever is in his arm's reach: walls, floors, furniture, etc. This makes complete sense when you think about his size again, as someone who is always facing criminals who are larger and sometimes armed. Of course he would improvise his weapons to take away the effect of size or strength. He knows he cannot win a straight strength contest, so that just shows his intelligence. And the other thing about his style that I like is that he always strikes first in his fights and makes sure the other person is physically or psychologically incapable of continuing. Watch how quickly the violence escalates in the prison corridor scene and how little hesitation Rorschach showed. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me. The best line spoken by him among the many cool ones. What did Dr. Malcolm Long's evaluation actually reveal? I want to spend real time on this because I feel the Long sessions in Chapter 6 are some of the best pieces of character writing in the entire series. Dr. Malcolm Long is very optimistic when he takes those sessions as he believes that he can help Walter Kovacs. However, what he does not know is that he is being played. Rorschach even lies to him earlier by saying that he sees pretty butterflies and nice flowers when he looks at ink blots, when in reality, he sees a dog with its head split in half. Long takes his pleasant answers at face value and writes in his notes. Kovacs should have just continued with his nice answers, but no. He decides to show Long what's actually in his head. You know what happens when Rorschach puts his thoughts into your head? Yeah, so Long's marriage becomes damaged and whatever beliefs or optimism he had are gone like the wind. But the interesting finding from Long's assessment is that Kovacs is not simply detached from reality in a cartoon villain way. He clearly fully understands what he is doing and can articulate himself properly. He just has this pessimistic worldview that the world is harsh, cannot be saved, and the only solution is to be more harsh towards the world. His biology is just built for a world that, as the comics keep suggesting, may actually be as cruel as he believes it is. That's the most disturbing part of the story. What does his death tell us about his psychology? I have saved this for last because I think it changes how you see everything about Rorschach. In the last issue, Ozymandias has already carried out his plan and millions are dead. Yes, the world is finally moving towards peace, but at the cost of everyone believing a false story. Revealing the truth could start a nuclear war, so the other heroes also stay silent. But Rorschach refuses and says people deserve to know the truth despite the consequence. Dr. Manhattan has to kill him because Rorschach will not compromise even at the end of the world. Rorschach removes his mask, cries for the first time in the story, and tells Manhattan to do it. Seeing a man who has never feared pain or violence finally break down emotionally is one of the most powerful moments of the series, and it really amazes me how much he stuck by his beliefs till the end, that he would rather die than live in a world of lies. Truth mattered for him the most, and he could not accept a world that was not clearly right or wrong. The tragic part is he is now facing a reality where a terrible lie might save humanity better than the truth could, but he still can't live with this. Rorschach died for his principles, but he became the symbol of something he would have hated, as the 7th Cavalry turned writings from his journal into a white supremacist movement. His extreme, uncompromising ideas become a tool of danger, and that's the saddest part of this story. So that's all I've got for you today. I mean, I could keep going for another hour, but I will spare you, because Rorschach is like a full biological and psychological case study walking around in a trench coat, and the more I dig into him, the more I realize there is so much more to him. Walter Kovacs never stood a chance with his broken childhood and an identity built on a lie, and yet he became the most captivating person in the room. So let me know in the comments which fact hit the hardest. If you liked this video, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.